right, I think it's time to call our meeting to order, if we may, please. So we have a lot to cover today, and so it'll be great if we can go ahead and get started. Can we please have our roll call?
Councilmember Cochran.
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Hamrick.
Here.
Councilmember Jaquez.
Here.
Councilmember Meisner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Here.
Mayor Turner. Oh,
I just got
gave you
promoted.
Councilmember
Ooh,
Turner.
I see the future.
Mayor Trout.
I have no problem with that. No, here.
So sorry, see, you shouldn't have changed seats.
Okay.
Everyone's here.
Excellent, and I really appreciate seeing everyone in the audience. It's always nice to have participants of our residents here in our meetings and look forward to hearing from you. First, though, we're going to get our financial audit report. Wendy and Don, would you like to go ahead and come up and join Harry? And let's start out with our report.
Yeah. You can,
Yeah, take a comfortable seat.
whatever. Windy Swanhorst is one of the partner in the Hinkerland Company, and they have audited our financial statement for 2017. That was completed in June, and she is here to report to you the management letter and findings. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I just want to mention that you guys get from us this management letter. You know, it's a separate letter that tells you what we did during the audit process and what we found. So our goal when we come here is this document that your staff prepares. It's called your CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. You guys hire us to tell you that we think the numbers in here are all fairly stated in all material respects. So within this document, you'll find our opinion, tells you that we think that they are. And that's really our sole goal. That's our goal when we come here to do the audit. But our other responsibility under the auditing standards is if we identify weaknesses in your controls, and that really simply means could the numbers become misstated or could fraud occur, and your controls would not identify those errors or fraud. And if we see anything that rises to that significant level, we would be required to tell you about that in this letter. And the good news for you guys is that we did not identify anything we think rises to that level. Your controls in your finance department are pretty good. And, you know, just we can mostly tell that because when we come here, we don't make any adjustments to your financial statements. So, you know, everything looks pretty good to us. You know, like I said, no comments on any of the controls in here. I think the only thing that we talked to Harry about during the audit process was some IT stuff. And, you know, about your disaster recovery plan and some things like that. Again, it's not one of those significant deficiencies, but just something we identify that could need some work. And I know you had some turnover in your IT department. And I understand we're partly through that disaster recovery plan, and it's not quite finished yet. Well, it might be today, but it wasn't during the audit process. And that's really the only thing we talked about throughout the whole process.
Yeah, and to address that issue, we already started working with the independent consultant, and we are working to draft the disaster policy, and it should be in place within a month or so.
So
I'm sorry, may I speak?
Absolutely.
You're working with a disaster consultant,
recovery plan. That means if we have IT data stored in the building here, and if this building is destroyed, then what happens to the data? So we have to find some outside agency who can also storing the same data all the time. So in case of disaster, we can utilize that and we are not in trouble as far as the data is concerned. Same thing in the police department. Right now what we have is a police department, and City Hall has, you know, data backed up both sides, you know. But what the consultant want is it should be outside somewhere else, you know. That data should be maintained. So we are preparing a policy that what we should be having, and let employee knows that in case of disaster, what they should be doing.
I don't want to run down this rabbit trail, but there's two other things that I think we had talked about. Is in the event that we have no electricity, are our computers done out, or do we have backup supply?
Yeah.
Yes.
Currently, we do have.
Okay, and the other thing is, well, I get the idea about storage, done that myself, 3 different places. However, I'm more concerned about hackers that would take our information and then want to sell it back to us. And you and I were at a conference where that happened to a town, it's happened to CDOT. Is this disaster plan, is that a different scope of work or what?
There's something, hacker is very common, it's happening all the time in pretty much everywhere. And we are trying to tackle that issue with some technologies. Now we bought some education program that requires the employee to be educated what it needs to be done in case they see this type of email or this kind of information on their computer, then IT will handle that. But we have recently purchased a program that will handle that. But it's very common, it's very difficult to handle, but education is the key on that, and we will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilman Meisner.
Because we're on storage, so we, at the current time, have no secondary off-site storage at all?
No, outside, no. We have a police department and city hall. We are exchanging the data every day. So it's one backup is in the PD and one is here.
So we do?
But yeah, we do. But we are trying to find third party in the cloud where that can be stored all the time. It's very expensive, but we are planning to do that.
There's clouds out there now.
All right, do you have more to report to us, Harry, about the audit?
I'm going to have some highlights here in the presentation. Before that, all of you have this copy of this audit report. And that has just give you the outline. This has 4 tabs. And the first tab is the introduction section. And that is written by me and Tony. Just a transmittal letter that give you the economic background and the initiative and what the control procedures are. And then page 7, you can see the elected officials' name and the pictures. And then after financial section, that is the most important section. And that has first letter that what Wendy talked about, that shows the scope of the audit and the providing the opinion. If you look at the second page on that one, on the very first paragraph, it talks about the opinion. Then page 3 to 12, that is written by me, and that really give you an overall picture of what the financial statement is in the rest of the pages. So it's kind of a summary so if you have time and if you like to read, I would encourage you to read page 3 to 12, and you will have pretty much good understanding at what's in the back of the other pages. Then page 25 to all the way up to 47 is all the notes. If you want to know how much debt we have, how many fixed assets we have, or what the cash and investment is, that information is available in this section, in the note section. And the most important thing, if you don't have time and if you want to answer some of the questions what citizens pose, then you look at the statistical section, and we have all the information about the financial statement for 10 years. 10 years history is listed here in last 10 tables. That has revenue, demographic information, debt information, anything you need to know, you'll find on these tabs. So it's very important. Any questions?
Are there any questions from council members?
What is the cost of this audit?
The cost audit is $20,000.
Okay. And how long does it typically take?
How long it takes?
1 week,
It takes, they come in November and they do the initial audit up to the up to the October, first 10 months. And they come back in April and they do April, May, and June,
Okay.
3 months. It's very detailed information and they do very detailed check.
Okay.
Could, may I?
Okay, let's go over with these. So I'll give you some of the highlights on general fund first. And you can see this section shows what the final budget was in 2017 in each of the revenue and what the actual result is. And you can see the taxes and assessment category, that includes sales tax, property tax, franchise tax, all that. And that, we budgeted $8.1 million. We got about 8.1, at least $48,000 less than what we projected. License and permit categories, $166,000 we budgeted, and we received $353,000. That's very good, and that is because of the use tax, sales, the license and permits, and building permits is the most important. That one is. Intergovernmental, we budgeted more than $1 million, and you can see our actual is very close to what we budgeted. Charges for services, again, $65,000 more than what we expected on that result. The end of the, in total revenue, if you look at, we budgeted $11,027,260, and we end up receiving $11,337,60, $309,000 more than what we expected.
Harry?
Yes.
Why is the taxes and assessments down? What's your,
Taxes and assessment, partially it's a franchise tax, it fluctuates, and that's why it is, there are 3 or 4 franchise tax we have, and that's the reason we have that difference. It's very difficult to, project. It's very close than what we, projected.
Is there monies elsewhere for the Royal Gorge Bridge? Because I'm pretty sure they gave us more than $983,000.
Yeah,
For-
that's general fund only.
That's general fund
This
only?
is general fund.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, the expenditure side, general government, that includes all the department like city clerk, municipal court, city administration, community development, finance, IT, all that department includes under that categories. And we budgeted $3.3 million and we spent $3.1 million. So there's $186,000 we spent less than what was budgeted. Public safety, that police department, we budgeted $4.4 million and we spent $4.3 million. That's a difference of $132,000. Most of all these differences are because of the employee turnover. That's the major difference. Public works spend, we budgeted $2.3 million and actual expense was $2.2. We saved about $106,000 there. And culture and recreation, that is the parks and museum, $863,000 we budgeted, and $808 we spent, so there was a saving of $54,000. And the street budget and the capital outlay, you can see that $658,000 was budgeted in street. We spent $321,000. There was saving of $336,000. And the miscellaneous was $2.5 million into other capital was budgeted. We spent 1.4. There was a $1,098,000 saving. So in total, expenditures were way less than what we budgeted. You can see $14.4 million was budgeted. We spent 12.5, and that's a saving of $1.9 million. So here is
Harry?
the breakdown.
Harry, sorry, excuse me, we
Yes,
have a
go
couple of
ahead.
questions before we move on. Let's start with Councilman Meisner.
Well, maybe just some comment from council, but considering the interrelationships that happen between general fund and stormwater, at least from my perspective, it would be nice, maybe on a spreadsheet like this, or an explanation like this, that if we were to see the expenses in the general fund that are stormwater related. And then on the previous slide, where we see that intergovernmental, I assume a portion of that intergovernmental is that transfer that's happening from stormwater?
No, that intergovernmental is all the grants, highway users tax, tobacco tax.
So
That's,
where does the inter-fund transfer, it wouldn't be inter-fund, but
interfund transfer is not in the slide, but if you look at in the financial statement, you will see.
Yeah, there's a separate stormwater
There's a
fund
separate.
that would
Right.
reflect
Yeah,
that.
but we have to
that money that's
transfer
coming
money.
from
Yeah.
stormwater, where's that at in the revenues?
It's not in the revenue here. There will be under the sources here.
Page 37.
Let me show you on,
I guess my point is, as we continue to deal with the stormwater dilemma, it would be nice if those two figures in terms of that we're having legally to move back and forth was a little more obvious to us and to potentially the public that were to look at it.
Sure.
Versus digging into the entire budget to find that we moved over, $800,000 to cover expenses.
I'm making notes and I will come back just to, ease out your problem. We'll provide you more detail about that.
Does council understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So it shows on page 37, interfund balances and transactions, and it shows it transfers from general to
Operating accounts.
stormwater utility.
Like $581,000.
Yeah. Yeah. And page 20.
But I see what you're saying, because it is kind of a hot button.
Right, I mean, my point is as we get into these discussions,
Yeah.
we need to be able to ethically and openly show people that, for example, the amount of time in the last 3 weeks or 2 weeks that the street department has spent on stormwater activity, we know that that expense has to be covered by the stormwater fund enterprise and not the general fund, and there's got to be some money moving back and forth, and many people don't realize that. We need to continually put that at the forefront of our financials.
It needs to be made public, more public than hidden. Yeah, I agree.
816,000.
Are there any other questions from council members? Yes, Turner?
I noticed that we only used about half of our budget for the capital outlay on streets. Harry, do you know why that is?
What?
Why we only used about half of the capital outlay we had for streets?
There are several projects was not done. For example, MDT program, that was not available, so we have to carry this in 18 budget. And that was about 300,000, 161,000. There was a ditch crossing was not, done. We budgeted 100,000. That was not completed. So there is US 50 gateway was about $200,000, we budgeted, and that was not completed. So there are some river beautification program that was budgeted 441,000. Because of the grants, it didn't happen. So we carry forward that project in 18 budget.
Okay, and I
This is the
think
whole
those are in the
story.
asks for the next budget year.
Yeah, we carry
Okay.
forward in 18. This is 17 results, so,
Right. Okay.
And keep in mind, for anybody new council, and correct me if I'm wrong, Harry, but that street capital outlay is not 2A dollars.
No,
That is
this is general
That's-
fund.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
this is
the
nothing.
old street fund.
That's not
Yeah.
the street. Yeah, thank you.
That was my question.
Okay, any other questions from council members at this time? Mayor, you had a question earlier.
I don't
Yeah, I
change it.
apologize.
No.
Okay, Harry, thank you.
Here is the breakdown where the revenue sources are, and you can see the Royal Gorge Bridge. We received but the general fund portion is $983,000. Property tax we get $384,000. Specific ownership tax $67,000. We get franchise tax $777,000. But you can see the sales tax is the 60% of our revenue is coming from sales tax, $6.9 million. And another source of revenue is intergovernmental. See, you can see about 8% of the revenue coming from the intergovernmental. So we are heavily relying on Royal Gorge Bridge and the sales tax. If we don't have this one, our economy is bad, we have a significant problem.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out that the property tax, which in most communities in the country represents 30 to 40% of their gross revenue, in
We
our
get
case, it's about 3%.
3%.
And as a community, compared to other Colorado cities, we're about 62% lower property tax than the rest of the other cities in the state.
Chair.
Meisner?
Harry, that sales and use tax, is that inclusive or exclusive of a 2A?
No, that's not included. This is
exclusive.
2%.
Yeah, 2A has its own fund.
That's a separate fund. I have a separate slide for that. Any question? Okay, this is where the
excuse me.
money
Okay,
goes.
sorry,
Yes,
Harry, one
just
more.
one thing, if you could go back, the other thing to point out about this slide is that our franchise tax is about $780,000 more or less,
Yeah.
of which $500,000 is our Black Hills franchise.
Black Hills, about 550,000.
So
Yes.
the franchise fee just for Black Hills exceeds all the property tax we collect in the entire city.
And for any general public that's listening, keep in mind that if the Black Hills agreement were not approved, we're already planning for this because who knows what happens. A big portion of that $700,000 potentially would not come in as revenue because there would be no agreement in place in the interim until whatever happens with Black Hills. So we're trying to be prudent and recognize that we don't know what the voting public's going to do relative to the Black Hills franchise, but that $700,000 is a chunk of the budget that we have to account for if it's not going to be there.
We have to cut a significant amount of the expenses if that happens. Where does the general fund money go? Here is 14% of the total expenditures we spend in the capital budget. Here. Public safety is 34%, 35% is on the police department. 17% of the expenditures goes public works, and general government, all other departments, 25%. You can see most important here is the debt service. How little debt service we have, only 1% of the expenses. That's what we should be proud of. I think most of the cities, you might see 20% here. So we don't have that much debt other than City Hall. And that will be paid off in 2 years.
That's because of our finance director.
Oh no, because of your leadership, I think it's very important.
But on the opposite side of the coin, most cities are probably within 10% of their budget for debt service. What that reflects is significant capital investments. What this reflects is good financially, but also reflects that we have not been keeping pace with the capital infrastructure needs of this community. Whether it's roads or stormwater, we're suffering the consequences of that kind of policy. And it's been going on for decades.
I would make one comment for sure, that this size of the government, what we have, if you compare to the other cities, we are in excellent shape. Not only this year, but over the years. And the reason we have saved for rainy days. Whenever we had, for example, the fire in the Royal Gorge Bridge, we never cut any services. We survived because we had enough reserve in place. in order to survive in the case of, and because of these revenues, what we are heavily relying on sales tax. We have to have some conservative number. We have to have some reserve available all the time because you don't know what the economy will do. And if you don't want to cut the services and you want to be healthy, you got to have some money in the reserve, and we do have that to survive. And that is because of the past council and current council, I think, and Tony's leadership, I would say we are in excellent shape. Here is another example of sales tax, and you can see from 2008 to 17 how we are progressing on sales tax. And you can see here we are very stable in this year, 2010 to 2013, not much of a difference in sales tax. It started climbing little bit here, and now, we are doing much better from last 3 years, 15, 16, and 17.
Harry, would you say we're just keeping up with inflation?
No.
It's better than inflation.
Better.
So we are making, good progress here in last 3 years.
Inflation's been averaging about 2% over that period of time. We're growing at 3 or 4%.
3,
right?
4%.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a good thing to have. But as long as we see this slowly chart up, we are fine. If we see the decline and this chart goes down, that's where we need to worry about. Until then, we are fine.
The only downside is in our heavy reliance upon the sales taxes is directly linked to the economy. It's a very volatile source of revenue. So when there's a recession, you're going to see a major fall off because it's consumption driven.
Here is the fund balance allocation, how we allocate our fund balance, which is very important. And let me some of this. Okay. There are different classification here. The most important is what is unassigned. This fund is available for future appropriation. Non-spendable, that means inventories you cannot spend. That's what that is. Restricted is restricted by legislature. Like for Tabor, and the Tabor we are required to have 3% of the revenue. That's what that is. Committed is the one is council expressed some kind of a wish that we want to spend that money for a specific purpose. That's what that is. And assigned is, again, this one is also council has specified that in future our intention is to spend for specific reason, and that's why it is allocated under assigned. And after that, after remaining portion is unassigned, and that is for available for future appropriation. And again, you can see we have 38% of the fund balance available, which is a good thing. Normally, people don't have 15 to 20%.
At this point,
we are almost in good shape.
At this point, unassigned means for 2019?
19 will be different because this is 17 result. We already utilized some of the fund in 18 budget.
So it was assigned, but that was what we started out with.
We started out good. We are still
Okay.
good, but the result came out in 17 was
Okay.
positive.
Okay.
But keep in mind, some of these things we already took care of 18 budget. This is another history since 1996, how the Royal Gorge Bridge attendance is. And you can see in 96, we had 500,000 people visiting the Royal Gorge. And this is because of the fire in 2013. You can see that was dropped to 84,000 and then 42,000. And then we are back in here in 2017 was 358,000. And I can tell you that 2018 so far, they have at least 4-5% increase. So they're doing much better in attendance-wise. Here is the comparison between the attendance and the revenue. You can see here, last 10 years, you can see the attendance is very steady. Here, 2013 is 14 again was because of the fire, and then it picked up. But every year is identical. But if you see the revenues is jacking up. This revenue is last 3 years, it's been a good year for them. And that continue to be in 18, looks like they are doing much better for 7 months.
Ashley.
That's revenue. I should raise my hand. I'm not used to
Go
doing
ahead,
that.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
That's revenue to the city, that's not gross revenue, what the bridge
No,
itself generates.
this is what we receive.
Okay, just want to clarify.
Bridge made about 11 million total gross.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, this is what we receive. This
Okay.
is city's financial, yeah.
Meisner?
Just for council's information, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, or Harry, I think the 14 figures, if you look at the revenue versus the attendance, and you're saying, wow, that was a heck of a year. If I recall correctly, the bridge elected to utilize their insurance fund to pay that money because there's a minimum amount due each year as part of that
There was-
contract.
Under the contract, they're required to pay us minimum dollar amount, that's what they did.
So versus risking losing or putting that contract at risk, they elected to use their insurance fund to pay that money to the city. So it's not a true reflection of revenue versus
That's true,
income
yeah.
for 14.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Any other questions from council at this time? Okay, Harry?
Okay, this is a street improvement fund. And you can see what the total resources, what we had was $8.4 million. Out of that, $3,428,000 we collected from the tax. That is about 40% or 41% of the total revenue resources. This is the good news. We earn about $39,000 interest over the year. And then we borrowed $5 million. You all approved that from the other fund. And that was about 59% of the total resources. So these three makes out $8.4 million.
I would like to make a comment too for the public. I've received several emails asking why we had so much building last year, now they see almost nothing this year, what's happening with the taxpayer money. Well, last year we had that $5 million interfund loan, which allowed us to do considerable building of the streets for a strong kickoff at the beginning of that sales tax being passed. And then this year we rearranged how we did the bid process, which put us a little bit behind. But we are on schedule to do 2 streets this year, because now we only can spend about $3.5 million a year, which is considerably less. And so there'll be 2 streets this year, and next year from the savings that we did from scaling back this year, we'll be able to hit first thing in spring pretty strongly with several more streets.
And actually, what I heard from Adam was that he said it might end up spending $3.5 million. I don't
This year?
know. I don't know the detail, but he is thinking that it might end up, spending it.
We won't know until we
We won't
actually
know.
get the bid responses back
So for the
from
2
both fields
streets?
and,
He's not sure, but he
Park.
says it could be possible.
yeah.
Okay, so it's Park and Fields that will be done this
Right.
year.
Expenditure side, $6.9 million we spent, and we paid, general fund and other fund against that $5 million what we borrowed. $59,000 was the interest we paid, and the capital we spent in the street is $6.8 million. About 99% of the total expenditures was spent in the capital. Here is all the street listed, what we did on the 2A programs. rebuild the 10th Street, 16th Street, 1st Street and New York Avenue, Greenwood Avenue from 15th to 16th, rebuild the East Main, Mariposa, rebuild the Orchard Avenue from Highway 50, rebuild South Street, and rebuild the Yale from the College Avenue to Harding. So these are the list of all the streets what was rebuilt out of the 2A money. Little overview on the water fund. Water fund is much better shape than even general fund. Total revenue, we budgeted 7.1 million, and you can see we are very close what we collected, 7 million or $49,000 less than what we anticipated. Expense-wise, we $8.4 million we budgeted. We spent $7.7 million. There was a underspend about $702,000 than we budgeted. Here is the outstanding debt, and you can see we don't have too much debt other than a certificate of participation. That's a water debt, you know. But in the capital lease, $1.3 million is the balance on the city hall. And there is no compensation, compensated absences that reduced from 2016 to 17. You can see that 491 was in general government, and we reduced to 464. And business activities compensation absences was 200,000 in 16, and that ended up to 133,000. And part of that, we did that PTO balance paid off. That's why it happened.
Could you define compensated absences? Is that?
Compensated, yeah, that's the.
Tony's vacation.
Yeah.
Most, that's mine. Vacation, sick leave, our PTO, paid time off.
PTOs.
It's a liability that we have to record on our balance
We
sheet.
have to record at the end of the year what the liability is. If the city has to close and we have to pay off all the employees, this is what it will be.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is a relatively new government accounting standards requirement in the last couple of years. Previously, cities didn't have to report this on the balance sheet, which was not correct. It was a significant liability, and now that they do, and the public should have full disclosure what our liabilities are.
So it's sort of
We have
like
to do
an,
the full disclosure.
it's sort of like an unfunded.
Pension.
Pension.
Exactly.
Like your retirement's unfunded. Okay.
That is also now we are required to, publish here.
Okay.
You can see that one too.
Okay.
Harry, can we go back one more slide? One more. At the very bottom of expenditures, it says transfers out.
Yeah,
What is that transfers out
that
to?
is for utility billings.
Utility balance?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Self-insurance fund is doing again much better. Self-insurance fund is doing much better. You can see the 10 years data here. 2008, we had our fund balance about 585,000. Now we end up having over $1 million in 2017. So you can see the ups and downs because all the medical claims you can't, project, and it happens. As long as we see these ups and downs and we catch up, we are in good shape.
And that's, a great portion of that is reflected because we now just are insure us, no districts or anything else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons
Starting
we are
in
doing
17,
much
yeah.
better.
Okay.
Yeah. And so far in 18, we're doing much better. We are going to have, actually end of this month, we are going to renegotiate with the insurance company for the next year premium.
Would that increase in the health of that fund create a lower premium for our employees?
that help us to, have a less premium for the employees. It's an employee's benefit,
Right.
Because if we have the healthy fund balance or retained earnings, then we don't need to, have more premium charged to the employees.
Kept the premiums flat and no increases, where that's unheard of in any other private or governmental sector organizations. They're always having to cost shift back to the employees, increasing premiums. We haven't done that the last 2 years, and I hope we can go a couple more years without some shifting, because that's a very critical benefit to the employees, but they also recognize the value. What we did last year had about a 7% effect that they would have had to pay out of their salaries had we had to shift premiums to them. And we reinforce that with them all the time. Makes a big impact on your take-home pay.
Sure, okay.
Are there any other questions from council?
Yes.
Hamrick?
Yes, my question is stepping back a little bit. We've covered various, income streams and sources of expenditure on the city. And referring to the other document that we have, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, there was a lot of audit activity. In this report, there's a lot of reports on the pensions.
Correct.
Both for the employee, the police pensions and the employees.
Correct.
And it's just kind of for information for myself, and perhaps other council members, but, in Colorado, one of the big issues for the state budget is the public employees retirement account, and that there could be major disruptions in the state budget because of essentially non-funding the pensions. Does the information we've been provided with show us that what is our liability there, Harry? I mean, if the statewide fund went bust, are we still on the hook for the pensions? What happens there?
I'm glad you asked me that question. That's, it's a good question. Like you said, para, is a good example. What the standard change was a couple of years back, 2 years back, that in previous years, nobody was showing on financial statement what the individual liability is. So if para is not doing, good, only it will show under para's financial statement, not in the individual participants. There is law change, and now they have to tell us what our portion of the liability is, and we have to reflect in our financial statement. Because of that, there are quite a few para participants are in a negative fund balance because of their heavy liabilities. Luckily, FPPA is doing much better than para. And we don't have to carry the liability. Actually, we are carrying asset because they have more asset than liabilities. So we have recorded, positive into the allocation than every other city would be doing. So we are in good shape. Very first year we were being audited by FPPA. They check our pension records and they were very happy with it. Last year the result was much better and they continue doing better.
So to summarize, make sure I got it right, we've got two essentially retirement funds.
Right.
We've got the police and we have our public employees.
Yeah.
Our employees.
Right.
And so, but both of those funds are in the black and doing good.
We are doing good.
Any other questions? Wendy, I have a question for you. You said that when you do audits in other municipalities, you often have adjustments that are required to be done. How often do you have those adjustments or
Actually, Wendy can witness that our finance department is very accurate. I tell you that we are experienced staff we have. City is to be lucky for that because most of the audit they perform and they will witness and they will tell you that they always have some adjustment. I have in my 21 career might be maybe 2-3 times very minor adjustment they have done. And they always say that your staff does a good job. And I will ask Wendy to make a comment on that.
Right. Yeah, Harry's right. We made no adjustments to your financial statements. And for a city your size, that is pretty unusual. We will generally have at least a couple adjustments, but we generally don't have adjustments to your books unless it's something really unusual.
We have established a control procedure that every transaction has been checked by 2 or 3 people. And finally, I have checked everything, what is going on these numbers. So before they come, we make sure that every numbers are typed correctly and recorded correctly.
Harry, I just wanted to highlight that, especially in the news that we have seen in the locally in the past year, that I am grateful for your integrity in having those multiple checks in our accounts, and that over your 21 years, you've had an impeccable record of no adjustments, and we really appreciate your hard work and the hard work of the finance department. We really value your services. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you. With that, I am done unless you have any question. We can talk about the budget after this.
Yes, Councilman Meisner.
I just want to reiterate what Ms. Smith has just stated, that, I mean, our financial department is above and beyond, and I have the utmost confidence that it would be a little challenging for anybody to take a penny from you. And we appreciate that.
And we can each attest to that, right?
And I don't know that the general public understands that, but with the millions of dollars you're moving around, you're still tracking those pennies, and that gets important relative to making for sure that we don't have anything funny going on. And we really appreciate that, or I do.
And I do appreciate the council trust us, and what we present to you is the facts. When we give you some information, I don't release the information until I am satisfied. And that helps you guys to make a decision, because the facts is important. And if I have made some assumption, I'll be happy to tell you that this is the assumption, is not the facts. And that's how you make the decision, and I appreciate you are trusting us in every steps of the way, and that's how city can be successful.
Well, thank you. As much trust as there is, we do have an independent audit that attests to the integrity of the process, and I think that's really key.
And one other thing I forget to mention, just for general public, this report has been published and sent out for reviews, and there are 3 or 4 independent reviewers throughout the nation and Canada reviews this, and then make the comment what's wrong. And it's the same thing what Wendy said, this reviewer hardly sends us any comments that we have done anything wrong on this one. It's very, very rare cases we have, and comments what we get is just for the purpose of making comment, they make comments, and that's what it is. Otherwise, there is nothing wrong with it.
Are there any other final questions from City Council before we move on to the next item? All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you,
Thanks.
Harry.
Thank
But
you.
I'm pretty sure we still need to hear from you, Harry. Our next,
You're not done.
we're not done?
We'll talk about the budget now.
Yes, the
and
proposed
I would-
budget.
I would ask Tony to make a
Yeah, our intent is just to have a very broad discussion with the council to help us determine what your priorities are for the upcoming 2019 budget, both from an operating standpoint and a capital standpoint. So what we're providing you is a kind of a wish list we've heard or we've included here in addition to the proposed capital program that the staff has put together. What we'd like to do is get a sense of giving us your priorities. Tell us, which things are a must, which things maybe you'd like, if the resources are available. But if we can get that general information from you about what your top priorities are, both from an operating and capital standpoint, that will help us put the budget together and bring it back to you later in the summer.
All right. right, Harry, do you want to get us started in our conversation?
Yeah, the list what I have provided you, this is what we have included in our thoughts. We haven't put together the numbers yet. This is just a starting procedure, and we are collecting the information from the staff and from you all. Once we know the facts, what we need to include, then we will put together the numbers and tell you whether we can incorporate this or not, or why we did not. But what this is, that I got the instruction from Tony that we might want to include 3% of merit pool. That will cost $353,000. That's what we do every year. This is nothing unusual. Every year we put about 3%. Salary survey adjustments, you know that we have issues, police department and other we are not competitive with the other cities, you know, and as a result, we are losing employees, and we have a hard time to find employees. So that reason we need to do the survey, and we think that if that has happened, it might cost approximate $200,000.
Yeah, and again, to emphasize, the salary survey would only adjust classification salaries if they weren't at the minimum of the benchmark organizations we measure against, whether it's Fremont County, Pueblo, Salida, Alamosa. We look at southern Colorado communities. We're not looking at the Front Range. They're in a totally different fiscal world than we are. We're looking at people that would generally want to relocate or be hired in this general region of the state, and we consistently are at the bottom of our salaries. And so to make sure that we're at least at the minimum, we've done a salary survey last year. You adjusted salaries by almost $200,000. Half of them were the police department, and we would expect probably the same this year, because other communities that we're competing against, they're moving their salary schedules up every year. They're making adjustments because they have to be competitive also. We're not going to get in an arms race. We can never compete with Pueblo and Colorado Springs, for example, on police. They pay almost $20,000 more per year, but at least we want to be at the minimum and not in the basement. So that's what that adjustment would allow us to do.
The health insurance, we don't know yet, but we are projecting that we might have a 5% increase. That will cost about $100,000. On our insurance side, inflation is always about 8 to 10%. Medical inflation goes, up, and depending on how many claims what we have, larger claims, meaning more than $50,000, $100,000. Depending on that, you get the premium rates, and that's why always it's a good idea to, have some in the budget. It's when we are thinking about 5% increase. So that will cost us about $100,000. Additional life insurance, that's another concern we had, that the average right now, our coverage is $50,000. If we jack up $150,000, that will cost additional $36,000. Again, this cost included in the self-insurance fund, not in the general fund.
Yeah, and again, if you recall earlier, this was largely driven by the interests and concerns of our police department. There had been a number of unfortunate police officer fatalities in the state of Colorado. $50,000 clearly does not cut it. That basically covers burial and funeral expenses. Certainly can't support a family of a police officer or an employee. So we looked at that, first looking at what would it cost just to increase the police department insurance from $50,000 to $150,000. It was about $28,000. So for basically $9,000 more, we can cover the whole city and increase the insurance to $150,000. That would at least sustain a family for hopefully a year or two if something tragic were to happen to a member of our organization.
The next item is sports field lights. There are two different areas. I think Tony.
Centennial Park and Mountain View. Again, we already have a significant deficiency in sports and recreational assets in the city. It's further compounded by the fact we don't have lighted fields, so come wintertime, when it's dark at 5 o'clock and kids are supposed to be practicing, they can't because our fields aren't lighted. In most communities, you have lighted fields. It would cost roughly $90,000 per complex to light of these fields, but we would get greater utilization throughout the year. So we think it'd be a good investment.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Meisner?
Tony and/or Harry. My only concern is that prior to the plan moving forward with Centennial Park, is that we survey those surrounding residents. As we all know, lighting and residents sometimes is not a good combination.
No, it's usually a conflict. Now, we do have lighted tennis courts, so there is some precedent there, but again, you got to ask yourself, in most instances, these parks were there before the residents, so is it, just like an airport. You can't complain about airport noise when the airport was there for 50, 80 years, and now suddenly you have a problem with it.
Gee,
So we
which
wanna
city
wa-
did you live in there, Tony?
What's that?
Which city did you live in where the residents couldn't complain about the airports?
Every city where I've had an airport.
But the airport had the planes. The park didn't necessarily have lights, and that's a significant
But
difference.
you expect activity at parks, and
Yes.
that's why the tennis center has lights, and there clearly will be some adverse impact, but you've got to weigh that against the benefits to the greater community, and that's what we're looking at here.
So are you suggesting there would not be a survey?
No, I would do a survey, but I wouldn't just base it upon the feedback of a dozen people living around the park. It's not their park, it's the city's park.
It's still their homes.
That's why they invented shades.
So we can discuss this further as we move forward, depending on our priorities.
Yeah. And clearly, we'd have reasonable hours, too, like lights would probably go out by 9 o'clock.
2
That's
o'clock
pretty
a.m.
common.
I know usually practices are over by 7.
6 or 7,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is, again, it's a wish list. We will seek your direction on this, any of these items. 2019, we have committed the city share for lodging tax, if that is approved, and there will be about $300,000.
Yeah, we see this more as an investment than a cost. We've got to drive, increased visitor spending, which in turn generates sales tax, which you see as our single largest source of income. Visitors have a profound effect on our economy. Last year in Fremont County, they spent $76 million, and they contributed $2.5 million to local taxes. Those are taxes people that live here don't have to pay because of visitors from Denver, Colorado Springs, Texas, and elsewhere. So we are marginalized right now because we only spend $200,000 annually to promote all the Royal Gorge region. By comparison, Alamosa is spending $700,000, Gunnison $1.3 million, Durango $1.1 million. These are our competitors. They're spending 4 to 5 times annually more than we are, and as a result, they're benefiting. And we want to make this investment and match what hopefully the proposed lodging tax will generate. So we'll have a budget closer to $600,000 to $700,000 to market and promote this region. It's not just the city, it's the region. It's the outdoor activities, it's the train, it's the bridge. But more importantly, most of the money, 70% of the money spent by visitors is on retail, dining, gas, local businesses. Not rafting companies or the bridge, but local businesses.
Yeah.
Do you have a comment, Mayor?
Yeah. Will this go on if the lodging tax doesn't pass?
No, because there'd really be nothing to match.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Good. I do have some problem with
Yeah.
it, even if the lodging tax
Yeah.
passes. I would like to wait a year and see how they're going to distribute and do their money. I think that if the lodging tax passes, and I hope it does, I'm in favor of it, to throw this huge sum at a fledgling organization,
Yeah.
I have a problem with that. I think maybe we should see how they're going to actually use their money that first year.
We can share, they already
You know,
have a plan based upon last year, which never got executed, so we can share that with you.
It's an non-action plan.
Yeah.
So, okay. I
But
just
we'll
want,
get back to you on that.
Yep.
But if we just rely upon the lodging tax, if it were to pass in the city, that would generate about $300,000. It's only a $100,000 increase over the current status of our investment, so that's not going to have a significant impact on promotions and marketing. If we get up to 600 or 700,000, that will, and that's the reason behind this. The other argument is the lodging community only captures about 25% of all visitor spending. So their argument is we don't want to carry the entire burden for marketing. It needs to be shared again, through retailers, restaurants, gas stations. The only way to properly collect the money from them is through the sales tax, and that's what this match would represent, their contribution to the marketing effort.
Madam Chair.
Yes, my
The other information for the mayor, which I know he knows from council, is that particularly with agency funding, we just don't give them $20,000. We give them $20,000 for a specific related expense that they've submitted for. And I would think we could do the same thing here, is that $300,000, we would specifically state how that money is going to be used.
It's in the ordinance you adopted. You have to approve their budget. You have to approve their marketing plan. So you have oversight ultimately over their activities.
Which is
and
why
their
we
expenses.
created the city tourism board, is so that we could have that control.
Yes.
And say. Harry, do you want to finish the?
Okay, next is election cost. There are, expired, some of the council has to, I think, have a time limit. So might be an election there. The cost is about approximate 28,500. Cemetery, I would say cemetery, but Parks Department is requesting two full-time employees, and if that is approved, then that will cost approximately $103,000.
Yeah, this is the only proposed personnel increase in the entire city. As you well know, when the recession hit, the Parks Department took the brunt of that cut. They lost a number of their employees. Interesting enough, I just looked back. If you go back to 2008, we've actually had a 9% reduction in total employees, so we're clearly doing more with less. But Parks in particular, trying to maintain a cemetery with over 10,000, headstones, and the new parks and the improvements we've made, they're not keeping up, and this would be absolutely necessary for them. We've tried to get by with seasonals. It helps, but it's not the full solution.
And Harry, on that $103,000, is that strictly salary, or is that everything included?
Salary and
Health insurance and everything?
Salary.
Well, this way the people understand it's not $103,000
No.
for salary. It takes into consideration everything that goes with those
Health
employees.
benefits, pension, everything. Yeah.
It's 30,000 salary might be, but the benefit is about 20,000, so, yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Meisner? Hold on, Harry, one more question.
Go ahead.
Tony, Harry, where do we stand with trail maintenance in that whole park thing? Because I truly believe that's,
Yeah.
we're getting in a problem there. I realize our trails, by some opinions, are in good shape, but there's other opinions that we can't keep up relative to maybe just normal storm damage. But
Yeah. No, you got a valid point. You've budgeted the last 2 years for a trail builder,
Right.
Steve Thomas, who's done an outstanding job, has probably added almost 30 miles of new trails. That really comes to a conclusion near the end of this year, beginning next year. If you want to continue, his focus could be on maintenance, but we're also having a meeting with the BLM, FAR, to talk about the long-term maintenance needs, not just of our trails. They have just as many miles of trails, and they're not being adequately maintained, especially after this recent storm. Some of the critical hard times and redemption and recycled trails in the South Canyon area were devastated, and we need to go. And I see Dawson Ranch here. We just finished a lot of trails in Dawson Ranch. Those were significantly adversely impacted by this recent storm. So you're right, there's an absolute need to constantly go back. On average, it's about $2,500 per mile, so you can quickly do the math. We have roughly 50 trails, but it is something we have to account for in the future.
But
We've got an asset, we have to maintain it.
my question comes back with, we're talking about cemetery. Does that mean that those, how does that impact parks?
Actually, that's the reason I said, we mentioned here cemetery, but actually it's a parks employee.
Yeah,
So
but
they
they're
can be
cross-functional.
used
They
for-
work both in the cemetery and the parks. It's not like
Okay.
there used to be a separate
Right.
6-person cemetery crew. That was wiped out after the recession. Now it's the parks people plus seasonals that do both, the parks and the cemetery. As we knew from Memorial Day, we're falling behind both in the cemeteries and the parks, so they'll be used in both areas.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So the community agencies, we fund every year 50,000. That will continue next year if approved. And the comp plan is $60,000 for community development, and Tony can address that.
Well, we've chatted with you. We know there's resistance. We had estimated that over about a 3-year period to be a $300,000 expense. We're looking at grants. FEMA has a grant. We talked about Manitou Springs, how they coupled their comp plan with the hazardous mitigation plans, and FEMA paid for all of that. So we're looking into that. If you're still concerned about the comp plan, it's not an emergency that we have to do the next year or two. We might want to recommend moving those dollars, and not all of them are necessary, for the connectivity between Centennial Park and Main Street, that third street connection. It's reflected in the plan, kind of the yellow, I call it the yellow brick road. So maybe, for half this amount of money, we could at least have some design work done next year to show that connectivity, especially in relationship to the pedestrian safety plan that we hope we're going to get word back from CDOT any week now. Hopefully some of that work can be done next year so they're integrated and we can show a stronger connectivity and safe passage between the Centennial Park area and the downtown, because right now there's very little flow going back and forth. People are very intimidated by that highway, and we want to create improved connectivity for both assets.
I have a question.
So if you total up.
Okay, just a second, Harry. Council member.
The comp plan, I thought it was necessary. I thought we
Well, by law, you should be updating them every 20 years. Ours is approaching 20 years. In a couple of years, again, we could get by for another year without doing a lot of work in that area. In the interim, we can look at the FEMA option to see whether they could cover the cost of that, because it will probably take a year to get that kind of commitment. So we could be buying some time.
Okay. Thank you.
Harry, do you have more to go over, or can we go into some public comment?
Yeah, just all these total up, it was $1.4 million. So our inflation increase on the sales tax and the Royal Gorge Bridge is no more than 3%. So you can see, if we include all this, there's not too much room for anything else. What I would like you to tell us is any capital, expenditures you want to add into this list or take out. Tell us your priorities, whether it is important for you or whether it's necessary or absolute needed. So when we put together, we keep that thing in mind and say, okay, this is what council must have, then we'll put it. Because I looked at the request from department heads, and this is not uncommon, so don't feel that this is too much. But I have to cut about $1.5 million from their request, because otherwise we can't balance it. And this is normal. So Tony and I have pretty hard work to do in order to convince the department heads what they requested might not have happened. But I like to consider what your priority is, and we can put that one first, because that is more important what you like to do.
So Harry, you're saying the following pages, these are the department head requests that you've
Yeah,
already
this-
reviewed and made $1.5 million
Right.
cuts.
Yeah, we need to make some cut out of the operating or capital, whatever you wish. But we will end up doing that eventually, But out of that list, if you can identify that this is must, we need that, then we will incorporate. If you think that, might be we can get by next year in a 5-year plan, we can do that.
Okay. If you have a question, that's all right, but I think it might be prudent to have some public comment before City Council starts to have their discussion on the budget. Are you guys okay with that, or do you have something you need to address before?
Is the public comment relative to the budget?
Yes, we have several.
Okay. Sure, I guess.
All right, so if we could get the lights on. Before we have public comment, I do want to reiterate that each of you if you want to speak to City Council, you need to fill out a form now and submit it to our city clerk. It needs to be prudent towards the 2019 budget. We also ask that if you're speaking on the same subject, that you provide new and different information if you speak afterwards, so that we aren't repetitive. and that we speak with respect, and you have 3 minutes. I know that a lot of you are probably here concerning stormwater, and so I think it's important as you put together your comments concerning stormwater that you do realize that stormwater utility fund is completely separate and different than the general fund that we talked about today. However, it's independent, its revenues are generated independently and spent independently. However, I do think it's important as we look ahead to 2019 that City Council is aware of the bigger picture and the overall status of where we're at in the Canyon City's needs. And so we always value your comments and help to hopefully keep us grounded. So we're going to go ahead and start with Will Collin, if you wouldn't mind. Yes, do you have a comment first?
Well, just relative to what Ms. Smith is saying, what's the total stormwater budget
About 1.3.
and the total city budget?
Well, total city budget is over 31 million.
Right.
Yeah.
So keep in mind, we're talking stormwater, this little bucket, and city up here. I mean, they're just not even closely comparable in terms of the dollars that are revenue generated and the expenses.
Okay, Will.
Thank you. My name is Will Cole, and I live at 1340 College Avenue. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. I've already talked to you guys about stormwater last time I was here, so I'll just leave that one alone. I did enjoy seeing your wish list, and I'd kind of like to throw out just an opinion. I spend a lot of time in our city mountain parks, not the ones with the nice green grass and the slides, but the ones that are outside the city limits. Temple Canyon Park, Red Canyon Park, and of course the Royal Gorge Park. I guess maybe to throw a little history in here, and I'll try to do this quick since we've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. So you guys know just a little bit of history about Guy, gosh, his name has slipped me now. He was a senator. His last name was Guy, and he was actually had a vision to have all of Canyon City as being a national park, okay? He was elected to 7 consecutive terms, and this was back in the 19-teens and 1920s. Obviously, that didn't happen, but he played a huge role in getting us 3 mountain parks. I don't know of any other municipality our size that has 3 city mountain parks. They're pretty special. The Royal Gorge Park, obviously special in its own right, gets its fair share. But the Red Canyon Park and the Temple Canyon Park don't see quite as much love. The roads going through those are not just from this last storm, but, and I could be wrong on this, I haven't seen any road work done in there probably in 6 years. It's getting to the point where an average vehicle can't get through there. Now, as some of you know, I don't like to come to here and just say, hey, we need to spend money. I have an idea on how we might get some money. There's a lot of camping out there. It's free camping. I think that there should be some type of a charge system for camping out there. That's going to do 2 things. One, it's going to generate some income. Will it generate enough to fix the roads? Probably not. But it might be a start. The roads need to be fixed immediately. But as a way to kind of promote some income from these parks, if we had paid camping out there, again, it would do 2 things. It could generate a little bit of income, but it's going to clean up those parks. It's you have quite a few people living out there right now, and I underline living. They don't move, they stay there. And they're making our natural resource a mess. Lots of trash. I don't think they're necessarily using the facilities like they should be. It's becoming a disaster out there, and this would be an opportunity to get it back to real camping, generate a little bit of income, and hopefully fix those roads. I would hope that you guys could fix the roads sooner than getting the camping paid for, set up there. By the way, East Canyon Campground, or East Royal Gorge Campground, I think is what you guys call it. You guys have done a little bit of work there. It's beautiful. It's really, really nice. That would go a long ways towards Red Canyon and Temple Canyon, because those parks have definitely, they need some love. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate
It
it.
looks like we might have some questions for you. Did you have a question? Okay, Councilman Meisner.
I don't have a question, but there's some preliminary monies projected in 2018 to address both of those situations, Temple Canyon and now.
Yeah, for 2019.
Subject to council approval, but
Yeah.
those 2 specific problems are specifically resurfacing, trying to get it addressed in the 18 or 19 budget.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you.
So I do have a question, Harry, for you. In here, it says that it would cost $85,000 to resurface Temple Canyon and Red Canyon. So is it $85,000 for both or for each?
That's for, I think both.
It'll do both.
Yeah, and this estimate we got from department head, so I don't know the exact, how they come up with.
Okay, and again, as far as our draw for tourism, these parks are a gem and a treasure. And I've recently been to both with a four-wheel drive, and they've gotten really, really bad, where just a regular car really should not be or could not pass on them. So
We actually found a truck out there stuck in Temple Canyon Park last week.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, thank you. We appreciate
you.
your time. Okay.
Thanks.
Next, we have Paul Fisher.
Paul Fisher, 299 Savage Loop, Canyon City, Wolf Park. I'm here representing Wolf Park this evening. And with regard to stormwater, I want to talk about two streets, Fenris Boulevard and Shiloh Drive. Both of those streets have undersized culverts. And I would like for the city to budget some money to add an additional culvert under both of those streets. And I'm on the board of directors of the HOA. We could possibly participate financially in a partnership to do that. And I'd like for you to take a look at that. It would alleviate a tremendous stress that's dumped on the homeowners up there in the entire Wolf Park subdivision. And that's really all I have to say this evening about the 2019 budget.
Meisner?
Tony, do you know, off the top of your head, I know you have these memorized, is the stormwater priority list, is that particular area identified on that list of all those 17 million projects? Do you know?
Yeah, there's $75 million.
Is that
I go back and look at those. Those are relatively small items.
right? But I mean, do you know if that's particular?
I know there was some proposed work in the Forge Road area. I have to go back and see exactly what portion, if Wolf Park was included in that. But in addition, you've got your major study that's coming out on August 31st that hopefully will help the council prioritize.
Well, that is for Dawson Ranch. I don't
Yeah.
know if that includes
No,
Wolf
this
Parks.
is more than Dawson Ranch,
okay.
But for example, in that $75 million unfunded list of stormwater projects, Dawson Ranch isn't even in there.
So this project may not be in that 75?
It may not. I'll have to double check.
Yeah, we can check. I mean, they've identified all these,
I can give Paul a call tomorrow.
Projects.
We have
Yeah,
it upstairs.
it doesn't change things other than the fact we're aware that it's one of the many problems we have.
The storm 4 or 5 years ago created the same type of problems. This storm created greater damage. Shiloh Road is about 70 yards. The water flowed 2 feet deep across the entire road. Fenris Boulevard, it destroyed the center island that the homeowners association maintains, and it turned a car sideways in there, and a lady had to be rescued out of a vehicle. And there's a tremendous amount of erosion on the north side of Fenris Boulevard that eroded out into the city right-of-way of Forge Road. So there's a need there for a tremendous amount of work. And I do thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, Paul.
I certainly wish you'd take a look at it.
All right, Mayor?
You had asked me if I or members of the council would meet with the Home Association of Wolf Park. Do you still want to do that?
Yes, sir, I still want to have
Okay,
that
I'd like to
meeting.
do it here. Is any other council member would like to join? I have dates from Paul. I can send you those, and I would,
What's the meeting?
to meet with the Home Association of Wolf Park.
I would be very happy to join in that meeting.
Okay, I'll send you some dates, and we'll get back to you. Maybe by that time, Tony can have some discussion on your culvert, and we'd just like to sit and listen to you, because we certainly are interested in both Dawson Ranch and Wolf Park, doing the best we can.
Okay.
Paul, and did you say you have money set aside that could be used for matching funds?
Wolf Park is different than Dawson Ranch. We're straddled and strapped with the maintenance of the stormwater easements and the detention ponds inside of Wolf Park. So we have to pay for all that. I'm asking for you to take care of a problem that's inside the city right-of-ways.
So this is the city right away. Okay, well, let's schedule that meeting and we'll
I
have
will
a
send,
more
you
in-depth
sent me an
discussion.
email with some dates that would work. We'll get together, and then other council members, if you'd want to. We have to publicize it, I suppose.
I wanted to ask Ashley, since this is her meeting, whether you want to couple it with August 23rd. We're going to have a meeting with Dawson Ranch on the stormwater issue. They're effectively neighbors. It might make sense just to have them both come at the same time and share information and see if we can get some resolution.
I'm getting a nod from the Dawson
Yeah.
Ranch HOA. I think
they're
that would
cousins.
probably be excellent. So with August 23rd, we already have a meeting scheduled
Yeah.
to discuss stormwater problems up in that area. We would like, if you are open to it, we'd love to invite Wolf Park to participate.
It's at
Yeah,
6:30.
I think we have a different situation. I think I'd like to have a separate meeting.
Okay,
If you
let's
could-
start with that.
If you could entertain that, I would appreciate it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get that date firmed up, and we'll have to put it as a public announcement, because more
Okay.
than one council member will be there.
Okay?
Okay?
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you, Paul. Judy Repass?
While she's taking the stand, I'd just like to forewarn council, everywhere in the city, there's stormwater problems.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful about trying to address specific problems within that extremely limited budget.
I absolutely agree with you, Councilman Meisner. It is I want to say global, but it is definitely an all-community problem. Judy?
I'm Judy Repass. I live at 221 Storm Ridge Drive, and I'm chairman of the Dawson Ranch HOA. And our HOA has been working with city officials, gosh, for years on stormwater. And the last 6 months, with the meeting with Tony and Adam Lancaster, we came forward with $10,000 if the city would match it. And that money's, it's going to be spent for a consultant to address the stormwater issues in Dawson. And I talked to Adam Lancaster a little while ago, and he said that he's in the process of getting the signature of the consultant. And Adam will provide data that 3 members of our area did in 2015. They measured culverts and inclines, et cetera, which should help the consultant with his work. My plea to you is, these recommendations, when they come forward, if there's not monies to address it, the recommendations aren't going to be worthwhile. So please consider the recommendations, which should be in by the end of this year. The other thing I'd like to do is to personally thank Tony Falgene. I've had a lot of people call and say that Tony was a tremendous help with our July 23rd storm. He went above and beyond, and you should know that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that, Judy.
Thank you.
Dennis? Yep, McMillan.
Good evening, all. My name is Dennis McMillan, new resident of Canyon. Just moved from Kansas City about 6 months ago to 120 Morning Dove Drive. I'm the bottom of the hill for most of the rain that came into Dawson Ranch. So, of course, I was flooded, and we're having our issues. My main question tonight was mainly about with the debris that comes with the storm and is left in city right-of-ways and, in the arroyo that goes underneath Blue Grouse. Whose responsibility is that to remove that and get that out of there so that the next storm that comes along, be it tomorrow or whatever, doesn't just back up and then my house is flooded again? And I know there's a study being done now about the culvert sizes and stuff of that, but it just seemed to me, just on its face, the design was just kind of flawed because my house is actually up against a dam with a 36-inch culvert carrying 4 or 5 different waterways, water into that one culvert. And that being in the cities, underneath the city street of Blue Grouse, I was really wanting the 2019 budget to reflect the necessity of that being changed and increased, not to mention the south side of Blue Grouse is now eroding and looks like the road is suspect to falling in.
Tony, do you have an answer to address this
The
question?
city is responsible for the maintenance of the culverts. The property owner is responsible for the right-of-way. That right-of-way is on your property, so if there's debris on your property, you would clean it up. If it's actually in the culvert, we have vacuum trucks and crews that will clean that up. But you're right, there's a fundamental flaw in the entire stormwater design of that subdivision. and we'll share that history with you
True.
on August 23rd. But that's, quote, water under the bridge. There's nothing we can do about that. It is what it is. But you're right, it's a very poor design and
Right.
inadequately.
Unfortunately, I bought the one at the very bottom of that design. Gave me.
Yeah, we're definitely aware and we're definitely concerned about it. The thing that's looming is the money to pay for it and to pay for it equitably throughout the community. Did you have anything else you wanted to address in your last?
Can I just clarify one point you can make? The debris that he's speaking of.
Mike, you'll need to come to the microphone, please.
Mike Karowski, I live at 463 Greenhorn in Dawson Ranch as well. The debris that he's speaking of is actually in the city rights of way. It's not in the private culverts or ditches that are run in the easements.
We'll look at the individual situation.
But what happens is the water comes down and collects all this debris, and then the city has come out and cleaned up the culverts so that water can get through them. Thank you very much. But what hasn't happened is the debris upstream or upslope hasn't been taken out as well. So the next 2-inch rain we get is going to just plug them right back up again.
Okay, we'll include that in our conversations. We appreciate your comments very much and look forward to having a lot more discussion on August 23rd and recommend that you guys really work proactively to get that word out to the fellow residents. Before we open up into conversation for City Council on doing 2019 budgets, I guess I have, maybe Mayor, you probably have the right to make the opening comments, but I have some comments too, maybe to lead our discussion.
You're now on the high dollar seat there, so you do it.
It's my volunteer work.
Oh, yes.
I think my overall concern this year in looking at our budget coming up is that we've been doing a lot of really amazing things that I'm really proud of for our community, and I think that we're prudent and needed. And I'm getting a little worried that there's some major infrastructure that needs to be taken care of. And one of the big zeros on our budget items in here, and I recognize it's in a separate fund, is that there's zero monies allocated to stormwater in 2019 under the utility fund. And we made that choice as a city council to do that based on certain circumstances. But I'm really concerned that, Meisner, you had mentioned that there was a gorilla under the bed, and I see that gorilla is multiplying, and they are getting pretty angry. And I think we need to keep that in mind in 2019. In my summer vacation, we have a cabin. It floats on the water. And no matter how many improvements we may make on our cabin, whether it's doing updates on the cabin itself, it's all useless if we don't put in the barrels underneath the docks. Otherwise, our floor would literally be floating under the water. And there are cabins in our community where they have been completely ruined because they are underwater and the infrastructure, the basics haven't been taken care of. And I just hoped that these comments maybe could help guide us in our conversation for the responsibilities that we have for those basic government obligations we have to take care of our citizens' needs of infrastructure. So with that, I think I'll open up the comments. I don't know if you guys just want to go around, go to each person and go from there on what your priorities are in looking to the future.
Where would you like to start?
Well, I think we'll start with you, Mayor.
I guess, Harry, I know. It looks like what you're saying is the only expendable money we have is that 1.1 million. Okay.
Well, I don't know if that's true.
Well, that's
Actually, I shouldn't be saying that because until I put together all the numbers, I won't know, what is available and what not. I would recommend whatever you have in the mind, make a recommendations. We'll try to put together, and if we cannot include, we'll come and tell you that because of this reason we cannot. We want to change the priority, we can change the priority. But I think right now, I'm in the process of collecting the information. Once that happens, I'll be back and get you specific information that, okay, this is what will happen.
Yeah. You still have some financial flexibility with your unassigned operating reserves, probably a little over $1 million that you could put into play. You've done that in the past with the park. You can do it in the future, whether it's stormwater or whatever other priority you deem it's important enough to use.
That's our piggy bank, though.
Yeah, but as long as you stay within the 20 to 30%, right now you're in excess of that. So this is in excess of your financial standards. That money's available. Also, the monies that are assigned are largely assigned for property acquisition. I think we've talked about different properties, so that's separate and distinct. So you wouldn't be robbing that pot of money to look at property acquisition.
But there's also some things under the request from the department heads, such as $600,000 for downtown improvements and et cetera, et cetera.
Some of that will be
Some of that could be optional or reprioritized
It's
as
all,
well.
this is all request.
Yeah.
It's up to us, up to you, to consider and say, okay, this is a good idea, this is not, this might be next year in 2020, this is very important. All that thing, we need to identify and say, okay, department head wants this, but really council wants this or not, or it's your priority.
Yeah.
You can tell us.
So we'd like to hear from the council. I'm glad you brought up that example because, Harry and I personally wouldn't endorse that investment. You invested $1.2 million in Main Street, which is great. More needs to be done. But again, as Jim always says, there's other parts of the community that need investment. So they should have to wait their turn. So if you could tell us what things you don't want as well as what you do want, that will help us just cut things out, because we're going to have to do it ourselves. But we prefer to get some input from the council early in this process, so you know that, we won't be bringing back some things you obviously do not want versus things you absolutely do want. That's basically what we want to hear. What are the essential things? What are the things that just are not practical?
Okay, so Mayor, what are your?
Well, he took the rest of my 3 minutes.
So it's somebody else's turn?
No, just let me talk.
Yeah.
I tell you, I'm not at all interested in extra tourism funding. I know that's probably going to get me. But you know what? I think we need to go to basics. Stormwater is a basic. We realized over a year ago, streets were a basic. And when we went out and did yeoman duty to get that passed, I think it's neat to have lights and a playground. I really do. I'm not sure right now with what we're going through, that's a priority. And again, a lot of soccer moms are going to drive over me. But let's be honest. I think the things that we do well is take care of that infrastructure. Tony cited that, and he's absolutely right. We have left some of this get behind. And maybe that, what we're talking about, the lights, the extra $300,000 to tourism, which may not go through, I hope it does. That should be put back on the scale, and this should go possibly to stormwater. It's a big deal, and it should be looked at all over town, because I do travel town. But it's not going to quit. This is going to get probably a little worse. But I think it should be roads and stormwater, roads and streets, our personnel, very important to us, obviously. And then everything after that. I also think, and I'll end by saying, I would like to see, and we do have a right to approve that budget. But maybe they need a year to get their act together, and then we'll take a look at it. But I'm just not at all interested in committing us to $300,000 for more tourism. I think there's components there that wheel has started turning. We're getting new restaurants. We're getting a new hotel. Maybe the outlook in a year, we're looking at it differently because they're going to be generating more income. And maybe on their own regard, they'll create the tourism to come into their shop. I just don't feel comfortable with looking at that expenditure while at the same time we're talking about what the basic needs of our community is, and I think those three things are the basic needs.
Okay, let's start over on this, because I always turn my head this way naturally, so I feel out of fairness. We should probably start on this side. Frank, do you want to say what your priorities would be for 2019?
Now, I said what I had to say with regards to the budget and all that other stuff. It's a work in progress, With regard to stormwater, I've always said this from the get-go. I think it's up to this council to look at whether it's an ordinance or whatever it is, get going on that so we can quit talking about it and get something to give to the voters, okay? Do we need to create something where we put it to the voters and get it out there? Talking about it is not going to solve it. Moving from some money to another place and that's not going to solve it. We need to solve it by looking at it. Where do we go? Whether it's 2019, 2020, but where do we go to get something that deals strictly with stormwater? Because that's never going to go away, okay?
So what are your priorities for 2019?
Like I said, the only priority I have is we need to look at, is there a feasibility to develop something with regards to stormwater that we can put to the voters, whether it's in 2019 or 2020? Let's show the voters that we're looking at that major problem, okay? The weather isn't going to get any better, okay? So, this other stuff, we've had it here and there and everywhere else. So we're looking at that. But we cannot count on, my opinion, taking money from some place or another place for a Band-Aid. And that's all we're doing, folks, I got a scratch here, put a Band-Aid on it.
Okay, Gonzalez.
I would like to see stormwater be addressed a lot deeper than it has been. And I don't know what the answer is, but, we'll have to just work towards that. But I would like to see the tourism that's coming into our community and heading out of town. I'd like to see them stop. I'd like to see them come and spend money downtown. I'd like to see, more than one block filled up in the evenings because that's the only block that's open. Tourism is a big part of our community, and I am in favor of the lodging just because I think it would help our community immensely. So that's where I stand.
Okay. Councilmember Cochran.
Obviously, stormwater is an issue for everybody, but in addition to that, I would like to see more money go towards our law enforcement. I feel that we have a lot of unsafe drivers. There's really no policing of speed limits or, people can't seem to quite figure out the intersections from the frontage road out onto Highway 50. Nearly every time I drive down there, you see a car parked in the middle of the intersection waiting for their light that they can no longer see as to when they can come out onto Highway 50. I think there's a lot of illegal drug use going on in Canyon that's frustrating for a lot of citizens. I know just on our street, we've had the police called because people are shooting up drugs on the other side of our fence, and, by the time you call, the response time is 6, 7, 8 minutes, and they're gone at that point, and there's really not a lot that can be done. I've heard a lot of complaints about the homeless population in the parks at night. I think that definitely needs to be addressed. Theft, we have this free bike giveaway, but, it's unfortunate that we've had as many bikes stolen as there have been, and it's, everybody that I talk to is, putting security cameras in and concerned about locking up their cars at night, and you shouldn't have to be concerned about the stuff in your garage or in your car because there's people wandering the streets at night, preying on you. I just think we're severely understaffed in our law enforcement, and I would like to see that change because, we can build up the infrastructure all we like, but if people don't feel safe here, then that's really a serious issue in my eyes. So I would like to see a lot more go towards law enforcement, be it, hiring more staff, more patrol officers, having more people out on patrol on a regular basis and not parked at the annex and not parked at the police department, but actually out patrolling our streets. That's where I see one of our major issues.
Okay. Hamrick.
Oh, I guess that would be me next. I agree with the mayor. I'm not so much the priority for sports field lighting is low on my list. What is high on my list is, making sure that we can have quality officers here in Grand Junction, in Canyon City. And to be able to do that, we've got to look at their salaries, and so that's an important thing for me. The infrastructure things are also pretty high on my list. Stormwater we're not going to solve right away. We've got to kind of have a transition plan to get us to do some things until we can get to the big solution that we need to get to. And that also includes, I think, my concern for the roads in our parks, what Will Colin was addressing. I think that's really important. Rather than spending money on the lights, I'd rather see us spend money on the roads in those two parks. And I kind of agree with the mayor also that it would be good. We want to see tourism here, but on the other hand, going from a budget of almost zero to 500,000, that's a heck of a step, and it might be prudent to let things develop first before we start throwing a lot of resources there.
All right, Councilman Meisner.
Well, I'm not on the same page as the mayor. News. But I'm not necessarily in favor of this field lighting situation. Most of those other items on that wish list page are I think, probably make sense. I think when you look at departmental-wise, the upgrading of the technology in this room, I think, is a must, considering where we're at in today's society and the connectivity that we need to have. This thing is 1950s. We can't keep it running. We can't do a video call. We can't do a voice-connected call. We can't do a conference call from our privacy room. I mean, we're talking about fundamental technology here. We need to get that upgraded so that we can provide a quality video and audio link to the public and to be able to do a video conference.
And just to mention to you that I'm working on that, and that money is not coming out of general fund or anything. That's coming out of the
franchise
special funds, and money is available. I'm going to propose to you guys whether you want to finish that this year or next year, but that will be done either this year or next year.
Because I see 100,000 here. Relative to the Temple Canyon and Red Canyon roads, again, I think those are critical elements that we've unfortunately not allocated the amount of monies that we probably should have over the last couple of years. Even if we're over that 85, I think we need to seriously look at what is it going to cost to get those two roads up to, let's just call it two-wheel pickup capabilities, if not passenger vehicles. So that's a concern that I've got from that departmental thing. I realize there's a number of equipment expenditures. I just assume you have to rely upon George that he's making, an educated decision there. I question the $2 million that we've got for the US 50 corridor. If that's $2 million for another study, I've already stated my position.
That number is going to be changed. That's a duplicate number. There's only 3.5 million. 2 million is not there.
I feel better now.
Okay.
But again, if we're talking about another study, and I realize studies are theoretically necessary, but I'm not interested in studying or in funding more studies in 2019.
So quick question on that. It says under the US 50 corridors, construction implementation. So is that a study? Is that actually working on a project towards the US 50 corridor?
Most of
plan?
that would be a grant.
Yeah.
For
But again,
construction, or
we won't know the
study?
details until CDOT is hopefully in the next couple months going to give us that final plan and see what the funding level is, if it's even available for 2019. So it's a little premature to discuss until we get that information from CDOT.
Her question was, though, is it a grant for the study or for?
No, for actual construction.
Okay.
Yeah. Now,
But that's
some
like-
money's for design, but most of it would be a
But that's
fractional
matching funds, too.
construction. What's that?
So the city's going to have to come up with some hard dollars.
Well, it says on here what
So,
million.
I don't know how we can
20%.
contemplate doing that and not putting it into stormwater or something like that.
That's why we're having this
I would not
conversation.
be in favor of that at all. I'm just not.
In closing, I guess,
Yeah.
I think Frank brings up a really valid point from a standpoint that I realize we're late in the year, but I almost question if from this council that we need to educate and communicate to the public. It would be nice now that if we could have thrown a question on the current ballot situation to increase the stormwater fee, whatever that is, based upon the residents of Canyon City to communicate, this is what it's going to take to fix the problem. And if you don't want to pay that, then you've got to go to Plan B.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we're doing a good enough job of communicating that realistically to these folks and everybody else, that the magnitude of the problem is millions of dollars, not hundreds of dollars, but millions of dollars. And
Are you saying you want to go to an election for the district, a tax? Because we can't raise the fee.
no, I'm saying we need to go, we would need well, because it's a fee, we wouldn't need an election.
No, you could do that on your own. You are going to get feedback in a week on the 2018 citizen survey. That question was asked. Are they in favor of a regional stormwater authority? And if so, how'd you like to pay for it? Through a fee, through a property tax, or a sales tax? You're going to get some good data, how people perceive that. And unfortunately, the storm.
We need to proceed forward with a solution
I agree.
to stormwater, and if that's $100 a month for everybody, so be it. That's the solution that we need to do relative to stormwater.
Yeah.
And if you don't want that solution, there's a bigger picture.
And we could bring back, we all recognize, you had to compromise on the recent stormwater fee increases. It was so gigantic. You accepted a 40%, which is still significant under any measure, but the last time it was increased was almost 10 years earlier. So more incremental increases, maybe we can bring back an incremental increase for 2019 to help pay for some of the things you're suggesting.
Some of the
Because it
baby
can't all
steps you
come
can
from the
take.
general fund, or you're going to have nothing left for basic services.
Meisner, did you have any other input on your priorities?
No, I mean, I question $85,000 for new printers and copiers.
That type of stuff, we can just, that's clearly going to
Some
get
of
cut.
that will be eliminated.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at all those departmental things,
Yeah.
those are
Just
some
their
things that-
wish list.
I mean, if the $600,000 for downtown does not include, the only thing I'm interested in doing downtown is fixing the current intersection problem, or the city buying me different vehicles,
Yeah.
that I can make those turns. I'm open to either.
You'll discuss next week, and it's a lot cheaper than $600,000.
I mean, we just need to fix those intersections and see how that settles with everybody,
Sure.
and then move forward with
Yeah.
12th Street and everything else.
Okay. Are you ready? Go ahead, Turner, your turn.
Thank you. Okay. I agree that I think one of our highest priorities should be salaries for our police department. We're having trouble staffing, and we're hearing from everyone that part of that is salary, so I'd like to see that as a priority for our budget next year. I'd also like us to put funds towards safety for people who are not in a car. The city is really unfriendly for folks who are walking or are on a bicycle. And part of that's the Highway 50 crossing. Folks feel like they're taking their lives in their own hands to get across Highway 50. If we could link our river to our downtown, we've talked about how that could be an economic benefit for us too. Folks who feel safe getting to those two locations can be going from the river and then spending money downtown and hopefully staying downtown. So I'd like to see us do that. Other quality of life improvements I'd like to see us look at next year is the roads in our mountain parks. I think we may have a consensus on that issue being something we should be putting funds toward. And we've talked about this throughout the year, and we're clearly have determined that the county's not responsible, we are. So I think we need to do the right thing there and have those parks available. I think we also need to talk about how we're going to plan for dealing with the homeless in the city. We can't just legislate them out of town. We've got to determine how we can have a plan for where the homeless can go. And I've heard people complain about camping in the parks. And Will mentioned tonight, too, that there are people who are just living in the mountain parks. I don't know if a solution to that is charging a fee up there. I think I'd like us to look at that. I think that was a great suggestion. If you have people who are just living up there because it's free to camp, that's probably not the proper use of that resource. But we need to talk about as a city how we're going to address the homeless population that we have here, because it seems to me is growing since I've moved to town anyway. The marketing funds, I'm torn. I think the amount that's proposed is high, but earlier this summer we were talking about communities that were advertised in Denver Post statewide, and getting those communities were in the paper and being advertised, and folks across the state knowing about those communities. And Canyon City has been left out of that, and part of that I think we identify is because we have not been marketing ourselves in that way. So if there's some smaller amount of fund that could still get us some bang for that buck, I'd like to talk about that. So I think that's important, especially when we look at the budget and how much of our budget is dependent on sales tax. Clearly, we need folks coming here if we want our budget to be robust in the coming years. And then stormwater obviously is a huge issue, but I think, and I'll be anxious to see the study that we're waiting to come back at the end of the month, which is going to look at regional stormwater. I really believe that a regional solution is required. So I hope that folks who are not within city limits are looking at this issue as well and thinking about how they may want to partner with us in addressing our stormwater issues, because it's not just a city limits issue. It's really something that affects our greater community. And we've already increased the fee 40% this year. I imagine folks don't want to see another increase, within less than a year, even though the need is there. So my hope is that we can get a greater pool of folks putting into that fund so that we can solve our problems regionally. But anyway, those are the things I'd like us to look at for next year.
Great.
Okay, I have a few things to add as well. As far as the stormwater, I think Hammer kind of really touched on it, that we do, and all of us agree that we need to aggressively look for a long-term solution, absolutely, but we're looking at years out at best, and we need to address it transitionally. And even if it does mean small incremental increases, I think we're going to have to at least have that conversation because our residents aren't willing to wait anymore. Other than that, as far as like the parks or the soccer moms and the lights at the fields, I think it might merit having some conversations with the local traveling soccer team, because they could potentially have resources to get grant money to pay for that. That wouldn't come from tax money, as well as improvements at Centennial Park. There's lots of GOCO grant money that I think we should at least attempt utilizing. That's technically our taxpayer money out there that we should try and at least garner some of that to come back to Canyon City. As far as what's in here on the list, the $600,000 for Main Street improvements, I agree with Meisner. I'm only interested in adjusting the bump out so that they're easier to turn on, and we'll go from there. We have $500,000 for Centennial, or for the CCMS, and we discussed on Monday that that's indefinite at this point. That could be a couple of years out, so I don't think we need to budget for that in this year either. That's money that could be freed up to go towards some infrastructure. And let me see what else I had some questions on. Also a priority on the streets for Temple Canyon and Red Canyon. And US 50 corridor, I'm hesitant on. I think we have other things we need to address. That's more, however, the pedestrian crossing, I think, is very important for us to look forward to, as well as the Lincoln School Safe Routes to School. They just got a grant, and that street desperately, desperately needs that for the safety of the kids. I do have a question on the $200,000 study for salary increases. And this may seem like a naive question, but couldn't that $200,000 just go directly towards creating salary increases instead of doing a study about it?
No, it's not a study. The adjustment is based upon a salary survey. We
Okay.
look at the benchmark minimum maximums of our competitors. If we're below the minimum, we bring those positions to you like we did last year. For example, last year, I think it was 72 positions out of 150 necessitated a bump. Most of that was in the police department, streets department, and parks department. I would probably guess it'd probably be similar to this year because those same competitors bumped their salaries up this past year. So we'll bring you that information later this summer. But the money is for the actual salary adjustments, not the study. We do that internally for free.
No, I have a terrible sense of humor, but I think, I know, but you worked for 8 cities.
Yeah.
You're a smart guy. Harry, why are we paying an expert when I think damn well you guys can go out there and figure that out?
No, we're doing it internally. We're not paying anyone.
We're not paying any
No,
consultants.
Stephanie actually conducts the survey.
Okay.
Yeah, this is all done internally.
See how bad my sense of humor is? I thought we were going to hire another expert.
Well, that's
My
what
eyes are
the
glazing over here.
kind of sounds like that.
It does sound like
Yeah.
that.
This is the
We
HR.
apologize.
HR will do the analysis by inquiring
That's the
other
fiscal
cities.
impact, what we're projecting.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Cochran has a question.
Yeah.
I do. Do we have somebody that just does grants or looks into grants?
No,
or-
not one specific person. We oftentimes will actually hire someone. If we just got almost $350,000 for the Arkansas River Corridor restoration improvements, we hired someone, I think it cost us $3,000 or $4,000, and we got $350,000.
Because like you mentioned, there are so many grants out there available,
Yeah.
and even talking to Florence Police Department, they apply for a lot of grants and get more equipment than they need, and I mean, they have license plate readers for every patrol vehicle. I mean, they have a plethora of equipment because they do have somebody that just constantly is applying for grants. And when we're talking about lighting and parks and equipment and, you know, police department and stuff like that, I think it would be seriously beneficial to have somebody who could sit down and just look at grants and see, rather than, you know, allotting budget to it or raising taxes.
We have, for example, Adam in engineering is tied into all the CDOT grants. He heads that up. In the police department, we have people going after police grants. Things like GOCO, we don't have someone in the Parks Department that has the opportunity, the time to do those grants. We'll hire an individual third party at a very nominal cost to go get those grants. But where we have the expertise in-house, those people are involved with drafting the grant requests. And we get our fair share of grants. But at the same time, we don't have someone that we just, that's all they do is write grants. Because it's a very specialized area. Just because you know about police grants doesn't mean you know about CDOT or engineering or GOCO. They're all very specialized areas. For example, the museum gets grants. It's a very specialized area. The library gets grants. They do that based on their expertise
But
and
we
their
could get
network.
someone who has experience in GOCO to do it. So for example, if we did do lighting at Centennial, I'm only interested in that if we actually put a soccer field there.
Yeah.
And my interest in a soccer field there is right now, we bring teams from all over the state of Colorado and Wyoming to come and play in Canyon City, and they go to the worst part of town, and they go to that field, which is a horrible field. It's not worth putting a light on.
Yeah.
And then they immediately leave. But if we can bring them into the heart of Canyon City, to one of the most beautiful spots, where they can see that there's the train and so many other opportunities, and can stop for lunch after the game,
Sure.
I think that could turn into an investment, as well as an opportunity for our kids to have wholesome recreation and be able to also be able to do it safely when it starts getting dark at night.
Well,
But I think that there are available funds.
I think we got some
to
really
go
good
that.
input from you and a sense of prioritization, also things that we may not and should not be investing in. So let us take a crack at this and then maybe come back in a month and get further input and further refine this process. We officially don't really bring the budget to you until October, but I think we should have another visit, maybe in early September, see if we're on the right road with you, and then continue forward. And we'll have also a better sense of our revenue projections by then, too.
Are there any other final comments from council members that you'd like to make before we close?
I think I'd like to make the comment that, you know, there's a lot of pressures on council to, respond to different needs that our community has. And really, just listening to everyone here tonight, you know, we have so much we mesh so well. Most things people were saying, I really agree with. And I think everyone, is in the same kind of boat, that we've got a lot of common ideas about how to address our problems here in this council.
I do really appreciate that about our council. Meisner,
Is this only on budget or just a comment?
you can make a comment, sure.
Well, I would ask for council's opinion on having a follow-up session with Journey Homes to the council. The council was instrumental in that whole process and also financially. Now that they're up and running, I think it would be prudent for them to at least kind of give us a status report in terms of what's going on with the home and kind of reiterate what their process is in terms of the residents and the discipline of their residents and how that whole process is going to work, because I think to some degree, we're a financial partner in that whole thing. But that's my request. I'm not sure what council's feeling is.
I think,
We'll invite them to either the August 20th or September 4th meeting, just to give you an update. I think that's prudent.
okay, Harry, do you have any final comments?
No, I think I appreciate your cooperation. Just to make a comment, that's a grant is a good thing you mentioned. If you look at on this report, page 16, you'll see how much grants what we have on the middle of the column. It identifies. We got about in this report about $1.6 million in grants. So we continue getting a good grants.
Yeah,
From those.
I would just like to see some of that
But
being
that's a
targeted
good
more for our
idea to
Centennial
have
Park.
grant administration.
And I do like focusing on connecting our Yellow Brick Road or whatever our connection to, because that goes along with the US 50 corridor crossing as well. All right, well, thanks, everyone. I really appreciate our work today, and we are adjourned.